We are live. I on the Illini, Mike Cagley, Brad Sturdy, Kedric Prince. We are excited because, folks, for the first time since 2001, the Illini have won 10 games. And I think when Brett Bielema came in there and Big Ten Wested a very good and very tough South Carolina team, I feel like the Illini are now a respectable force in college football. I'm not saying they're the number one team, but I'm saying they are no longer a team that people can look at, put a W on. They now are looked at as a team like, oh, shit, we better have it together because this team's going to play. Brad?
This is a great win. To get to 10 wins, beat a South Carolina team, it sets the program up. And I heard Matt talk about this, and I think Bielema just said it right there. They're post-game. They're a college football playoff contender next year in his mind. And so that's where they're at. And you realize that they just beat a team that everybody thought should have been in the college football playoff. They just beat them. And really, the game was 21-17. It probably should have been 28-17. They should have double-digit beat them. So that's pretty impressive. And Brett Bielema, hats off to you. I know you caught some flack at times, but for different things. But man, how about the way he was living rent-free in Shane Beamer's head in this one. This was fantastic.
You know what, guys? We remember when Lovie Smith was hired. We were all excited about it, and it was great. But Brett Bielema was hired to win and to put a program together where they can sustain it, and he's done that. Illinois, Mike, you said it right at the top. They are no longer the laughingstock of the Big Ten. This is what Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin did not want to see happen. They didn't want this because now he is running. They have a system in place. He is able to go out and he's recruiting well. He is doing extremely well in the transfer portal. No, they're not going out and paying $7-8 million for quarterbacks because they have a great quarterback right now. This was a big win on the national stage. And I'm going to be mean today on this podcast. This was so much fun for the fans. There was typical things. The second drive, when they threw the ball to Hank Beatty and they didn't score on the touchdown, the first thing came across my mind was the five of us who are in this IlliniGuys company, because we've all seen things that go wrong with Illinois. And on the 1 yard line, they don't score. And that was the first thing I thought of. Brett Bielema has changed the entire outlook of this program. They expect to win every time on the court. And that little smirk on his face, it got me motivated to play football again, and I never even played the game before. So it got me fired up, man, because that's what we need. That's what college athletics is about, guys. I'm just really excited for the fans. Those of you who are on this podcast listening to us, you should enjoy this because it's been a long time since Illinois football was relevant.
Yeah, I got to be honest with you. Look, we've all been defenders of Brett Bielema, and people have said, oh, you guys you're trying to soft pedal it because you cover Illini sports. Hey, look, folks, anybody who knows me knows what I thought of the Weber and Gross era. Anybody who knows Brad and Ked knows they call it straight down the middle. I am telling you, Brett Bielema sold me when I interviewed him one-on-one, and I felt like I was dealing with a corporate vice president as opposed to a football coach. Let's be tough and growl a lot. This man has a plan, and I'm telling you right now, I really feel like next year, I'm not saying Illinois is going to be in the CFP, but they're going to be a team that has to be thought of when they think about what's going on in the CFP. You can feel free to bookmark this, throw it back at me, but this is a young team. It's got a great coaching staff, and the NIL funds are starting to come, which means they're starting to be able to pick and choose who they need to make this team better. Brad, am I delusional or what do you think here?
Yeah, I think they were one of the younger teams in college football, especially one of the younger good teams in college football. They only had 14 guys running out of eligibility. I think only maybe 13 now with that new rule, maybe only 12 or 13 with the new NCAA giving guys an extra year. So it's a team that has potential. It's there. And if they can add a few guys in the portal, by the way, they need to add a punter. I'm just going out there, boy. Anybody else glad they didn't have to punt at the end? But
yes.
So they definitely need a punter. if they're going to be successful next year. But I think they're going to get an offensive lineman or two coming up. I think they may get some good news on that front. They are going to add more on the D line. I think they have another wide receiver coming. I think they may have another defensive back also coming. So there are guys that are going to be added to this roster, and they're going to be really good. And man, I am really impressed with what Brett Bielema has done here. He has an opportunity now to, if Illinois does make the college football playoff next year, that's amazing. They have a schedule that sets up well to go maybe 10-2 or 11-1 if they can pull an upset. So he's got this program in a great position moving forward. You bring your quarterback back, you have your running backs back, and a lot of people were like, it's Aiden Lawfrey, great today. I know he's a little overshadowed with McCray's end run, but man, those two guys were fantastic today. And that doesn't, the starting guy, really the guy who was Caden Fagan. He isn't even playing right now because he's injured. So that's why you have to have that running back depth. And even a young guy like Khalil Valentine's very explosive, and they brought in good guys too. So this is really they're really in a good spot up and down. If they can shore up a little bit on the line, both lines. But I thought their lines were good today. I will say that. I thought both lines played well today. So if they can shore those up just a little bit, add some depth, man, they can be really good.
I'm going to change my tune, Brad, just because you mentioned line. I have been probably the most critical of all of us about the offensive line. I don't know. Did Luke Altmaier even get sacked today? I'm not 100% sure.
One opening drive.
Okay, the offensive line did their job today. They did what they were supposed to do. And you're right. For the people out there listening, it's early in the podcast, but we're telling you, the recruiting is going to pick up. Brad's right. They're going to get more players in the portal. If you heard and listened to Brett Bielema's press conference that Matt Stevens recorded, he mentioned on January 2nd, they have to get back because there's a big recruit coming on campus. Now, here's what I want to know, and it should be us who know this, but I really don't. Illinois has the potential to come into the season next year, preseason ranked. With Luke Altmaier coming back, with all the weapons they have coming back, I'm really curious to see when was the last time Illinois football came into the preseason rank, because this year they were predicted to finish 13th or 14th, and now you see what they did, and all the questions now after they won, should they have been a college playoff team? Should they have been a college? Well, that's hard to say. You take what you got. You got to play on a New Year's Eve Day Bowl, when it mattered, when everybody in the country is watching. All the people out there, I know the two of you, Mike and Brad, I know you were receiving phone calls, people pulling for Illinois, wanting to see them win. This is what sports should be about. This is what Illinois athletics should have been the whole time.
Yeah, and look, we're gonna be pretty positive, folks. We try to stay positive anyway, but now there's a lot of reasons that we can see in terms of not just moving towards something, but actually accomplishing. And we've seen Brad Underwood do that. You're seeing Shauna do that in women's basketball, and Brett Bielema is doing this over in the football side. But when you see those three people. And obviously you've got people like Mike Small, who just fantastic for Illini golf, et cetera. But Josh Whitman has turned around this athletic program probably by sheer force of will. He's not infallible. He's made mistakes, but he keeps pushing people to improve. Brad, what do you think on Whitman, and is he the guy who this all springs from?
Yeah, it is a little bit, but here's the deal. As the athletic director, your job is this. You got to support your coaches the best you can. And you support them until you can't support them anymore. And you support them up until the time when you may have to fire them someday. That's the reality of the situation. And he supports his guys. He has their backs. He helps them. He understands I think he understands the dynamic that is NIL a little bit more than he maybe did earlier when it was like just starting out. I think he really gets the way it has to be. And I know he told boosters that if you're going to give to the iFund or to NIL, we need more money in NIL because you have to get players. So this is, and you're always going to have misses. Somebody says the only mistake he made was Lovie Smith. I would say Nancy Faye may have been a mistake too. But here's the thing. He took those mistakes of Lovie Smith and he got Brett Bielema. Nancy Faye and he got Shauna Green. He hit it out of the park at the second hires. But the other thing is, I love about what Josh Whitman has done is he goes out and he'll get guys. He'll get some NIL funds. And I would say this should probably give them another, instead of a $6 to $8 million NIL budget next year, it should be closer to $10 to $12 million NIL budget. These guys might get a little more money, and they might get a little more. Helps them find guys in the portal that they need to fill these holes or gaps to make this team complete. By the way, shout out to without Pat Bryant. How about Hank Beatty today? Hank Beatty was fantastic today.
Great.
That catch, the one catch, Altmaier threw it up, and the South Carolina guy Beatty just went through him and got it. It was a fantastic catch. I thought he was great. And I do believe that that's going to be a huge replacement. They're going to need him to be big next year.
I'll tell you what, guys, we talked about this just a few minutes ago, but what about just the dominance play? They just took an SEC team, lined up, put the mouthpiece in, and just knocked them all over the damn field today. That was not expected. They just physicalized them. They lined up. South Carolina knew they were running the football and could do nothing about it. That is Brett Bielema, Illinois, Big Ten football at its best. Brad, you're right. You know what? They didn't get the second. Whitman didn't get the second hire right with Nancy Faye and with Lovie Smith, but he did his homework. And again, remember, this has been a few years now. His introductory press conference. There's no reason you can't win at Illinois. What I want to see now is that Illinois become a permanent fixture on the national scene. This is a football podcast, but we know Brad Underwood has done that. Shauna Green is just a few injuries away from showing what she can continue to do. She's just, if you talk about a lady that got a couple leaves off the Lucky Charm, it's her, because she can't get a healthy team. And Brett Bielema just showed what Illini Nation's about. And right now, listening to this podcast, I can remember all the plays in the game, but the one thing that still sticks out to me was that little smirk on his face that we all saw on national TV, because that was priceless. That is what Illinois fans want to see. And I'm going to tell you, it's all over the social media. Again, great team win, and I want to see them build, which we talked about. They're going to, I know there's some guys that are contemplating leaving, and there's a chance that they could come back. This is a reason why you want to come back, because you will have an opportunity to play in the college playoffs. And if you do that, you don't have guys like Pat Bryant having to sit out because you're in the playoffs.
Yeah, and look, here's what I went through the stats, and there's a couple stats that jumped out to me. Illinois finished with 183 yards rushing, and they had the ball for 28 minutes and 44 seconds. But in the fourth quarter, folks, this ball that everybody we don't want to run the ball, it's boring. In the fourth quarter, Illinois had 115 yards of rushing and had the ball for 10 minutes and 35 seconds. And the South Carolina fans who were cussing at me on Twitter could do nothing but watch Illinois methodically end their life. And it's so happy that touchdown, Beatty looked like he hit the pylon. We know it looked like McCray scored a touchdown. Those didn't count, obviously. Only one of them could have. And then you had Franklin get the touchdown pass that had to be overruled. So it's so awesome to see Illinois come through it. But Brad, when we hear about Bielema ball and we hear about you can't run the ball and all this stuff, he literally crushed the life out of one of the best defenses in the country. Obviously, they were missing one key player, but so was Illinois on offense. And Illinois went out there 10 minutes and 35 seconds. When they had to do it, they moved the ball and dominated on the lines, like Ked said, against a very good SEC team that I thought, to be honest with you, is quite a bit better than this team, Alabama, that everybody was whining about for the CFP.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. By the way, we're still getting cussed out on Twitter, and so is Bielema. So we got that going for us. Always good. I do think I thought one thing about this is South Carolina team that people were saying Alabama was the highest ranked team, but everybody thought South Carolina was playing the best of anybody in that group of Ole Miss, South Carolina, Alabama, because Alabama's coming off just a complete drubbing by Oklahoma. We saw they got beat by Michigan today and just couldn't do anything against that Michigan team. Does that make Michigan, by the way, since Michigan beat Alabama, does that make it a good win for Illinois and Indiana now? I'm trying to figure out how the SEC works.
According to SEC fans, it's now an okay win.
Oh, okay. I was just curious how this works because Alabama, again, couldn't beat a 7-5 team. or 6-6 team or whatever they lose to. So no, it's very interesting to see how this has the all the banter back and forth between Big Ten and SEC. And right now, if the Big Ten, if Penn State or Ohio State or Oregon win the national title this year, and they're 3 of the 8 teams remaining, and I think they're going to be 2 of the 4. Clearly, they're going to be 1 of the 4 because they're playing each other.
Exactly.
But I think they're going to be 2 of the 4. If that happens, you have a Big Ten that has dominated the SEC head to head right now, and to win back-to-back national titles, we got to start. Do we start saying it just means more? It just means even more in the Big Ten? How does that work? I'm just talking smack.
You know what, though? What's really weird is because of the new teams in the Big Ten and SEC, you've always had those Big Ten and rivalries, but now it seems more magnified. It seems like right now that's all they're talking about. And what's tough for Big Ten people in Big Ten country, because the games are on ESPN, a lot of the games, you're going to get more bias toward the SEC a little bit. But the best way to shut them up is to win games. And I love, like, you look at the ACC, oh my gosh, what are they, 1-9, I think I saw today. This is just a big conference dominance, and to show and flex your muscles. Michigan won the national title last year, but again, because I'm a recruiting nut, this all matters. You can go back to recruits, and whether it be a kid or Michigan or Oregon, and say, hey, you know what? We're in the Big Ten, got the best market. We win. We went head to head against them. And if there was one team, it was an SEC school that let a Big Ten win slip away, was Rutgers. I thought that game was won. I turned away and found out that they lost. The Big Ten's had a good showing, and no disrespect to my Iowa fans, but if Kirk Ferentz wouldn't have punted that ball yesterday, you might have another win under your belt.
Yeah. Let's go and talk a few subjects because I don't want to miss anything. The first one is St. Dominic's Rosary may not have heard our halftime show when we talked about the importance of Illinois high school recruiting, and we certainly were all over that, and that was fantastic. But a few things. First off, Josh McCray has been one of our favorites at IlliniGuys the whole time he's been here. But boy, wasn't that awesome to see him get that opportunity after all the injuries and all the different times that he could have chosen to go another route, to try another school. Here he is, the first guy who committed to Brett Bielema, and I think he's a fantastic player. He is fun to watch. I thought it was just – I was really heartwarming to see him play such a key role in this victory.
Yeah, Josh McCray is the first recruit for Brett Bielema. It's fantastic. Great story. He's battled injuries, and he was huge today. And that's what it's all about. And I know college sports are now about money and all this stuff, but it's about persevering and overcoming. And that's what Josh McCray did. He persevered. He fought. He overcame all the injuries. And here this guy is, and he's been great. I just don't know what can be better than that. That's a great story, right? This is a guy who just does all those little things, and man, was he fantastic today. He broke on that touchdown run where he broke those 2 tackles, and now his 60-yard run, basically, I don't know that he was really touched. That was an easy run that most guys could. I wouldn't have made it through the hole yet. I'd still be in the backfield, but most of these guys would have been through it. But that touchdown run from 6 yards, from 9 yards out on 3rd and 3, that was one of the biggest plays of the game. And he broke 2 tackles, sheds a guy, and runs through. And man, it was so much fun.
Another thing about Brett Bielema, if you remember a few weeks ago, I guess more than a few weeks ago, when he was talking about Josh, he got really teary-eyed and he got emotional because of his journey with the injuries and, like you said, his family life, and then him being the first recruit. It was good to see him perform the way he performed today, and that's how dominant he was. And every time they needed 2 or 3 yards, South Carolina knew it, but couldn't do anything about it.
This is the Run My Own Business dream. This is the colleges paid for dream. This is the retire early dream. This is Busey, where your dreams and possibilities become moments through trusted guidance and expertise, through lifelong relationships. Because we're here to help you achieve the life you've always envisioned.
Yeah. Now let's go to another player. Hank Beatty, just unbelievable. He got robbed of a touchdown probably at the start of the game. had multiple big plays. Brad, obviously, you're very familiar with him. Is there any difference of a player who's playing with injuries and a player who's playing healthy? And could you describe that to me?
Remember at the beginning of the year, Beatty was out, and we were like, why is he not returning punts? Turns out he's one of the best punt returners in the Big Ten, not the country. And he's been fantastic back there, but he wasn't playing because he was wearing the injured jersey. So it wasn't 100%. Now you got a guy who's healthy and he's running, and you see his ability to get it in and out of cuts. He's got great hands, made big catches. And I actually think he scored on that touchdown too. I do think that was a touchdown. I think he hit the pylon. So
Bielema should have thrown out the flag and tried to get a.
It probably wouldn't have been as much fun then because they'd have been up by more points, and he wouldn't have had to troll Beamer, and we wouldn't have had all that fun that we had.
That is a good.
We wouldn't have memes going around. So this is why he didn't throw the flag, because he wanted to be able to troll Beamer down the stretch and win a closer game. That was it all. No, but Hank Beatty, again, another example of a kid persevering. This is a kid who came out of Rochester High School. He played wide receiver as a sophomore and then played quarterback his junior and senior year. So this is a kid who comes in. He's behind Isaiah Williams, but he earned his spot then this year. And I think next year I think you're going to see a breakout Hank Beatty. I think he's going to be really good. They're going to need some help on the outside, but I think as a slot guy, I think Beatty's fantastic, and I think he's going to be really good there.
I have a question for you guys. So this was a Big 12 officiating crew, if I remember, my memory serves me correctly. Now, we've been really critical of the Big Ten, but I want to know what your opinion of the officiating crew was today, because that was just awful. I saw fans from opposing teams they were asking, where in the hell did this crew come from? And I don't understand why they didn't even review the McRae touchdown. They didn't even look at it. So I'm just struggling with why on a game of this magnitude that they could not get a better officiating crew. And let me ask you, was that really taunting? Maybe Brett was because he laughed, but I don't know. It's hard to say, man.
I think it was a little bit of taunting, but you know what? It's whatever. It wasn't like it was egregious. It was one of those things, and I thought it was funny. But Beamer just lost his crap. You can't do that. You can't lose your stuff like that. And by the way, do you think Beamer wanted to get by his coaches there? Do you think he really wanted to get by the coaches and go after?
That's the last thing that man wants.
Hold me back. Hold me back. You can't hold me back. Hold me back. Make sure I don't get through, because I don't want to fight it. No. But yeah, no, so much fun. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I don't know that you could have a better ending to a season than what Illinois. That was a great bowl game. That was so much fun. Remember talking about eliminating bowl games?
Yeah, they don't count, Brad. They don't count. Nobody cares.
Yeah. Did those guys play like they didn't care about this bowl game? Did those kids play like that? Man, that was fantastic.
That is a tribute to those coaches, though, Brad.
Oh, for sure. That's getting the most out of your guys and getting those guys to want to play. Both teams, and this is both teams, because they did have guys opt out. Both teams had guys, their star player on Illinois, Pat Bryant, and their star defensive player and the running back to opt out for South Carolina. And Illinois had some other guys who their punter. That didn't help, right? Not having a punter really either. But overall, man, it was impressive to get that kind of effort and intensity out of those two teams.
Now, I had the impression that during the year, there were times Brett Bielema wasn't very thrilled with the defensive substitution rule himself, but I thought that was a wise move to take the initiative away from a very athletic South Carolina team and to use the rule book in your advantage. I'm not saying that this isn't pro wrestling. He didn't throw the rule book away. He took the rule book and said, how do I use this to mess with these guys? And I thought that was very well done. And I thought he got into Beamer's head. And I don't know that I don't think there was any like call that Beamer messed up on because of this. But as a player, when I'm watching my coach melt down over something like that, I'm like, Jesus, coach, we got to play the game.
Here's my thing about this. What he did was he used the rules to his advantage, which is what good coaches do, right? But here's the other thing. South Carolina also, they saw on film that South Carolina did a lot of late subbing, and teams wouldn't change. They'd make one sub. If you sub one player, then Illinois runs 3 guys in and 3 guys out when you make that one sub. But it wasn't the first sub that was getting them. South Carolina they were constantly making one sub, and then 5 seconds later, another guy would come on, which meant Illinois could make another set of subs. On that goal line situation, they used that timeout. They didn't just have the first one. They had 2 separate subs. That's why he had to use timeout, because Illinois then said, okay, let's send 3 guys in. And that substitution pattern is part of the game. Could they, and it's up to the officials to decide if they're getting on and off fast enough. And they, but at the end of the day, though, do a better job of being prepared. Now, I get it. It's first game for Shula calling plays for South Carolina. And maybe that was a cause some issues for them, but Bielema took advantage of that. But I think what really happened here was Bielema used the rule book to disadvantage because they like to play up tempo, and he slowed their tempo down, and he made it difficult on them. So that's just all it is, and it's part of coaching. It's no different than It's no different than in basketball, a team holding the ball, and you can't get it from them. Running clock, 20 seconds off the shot clock before they run any offense. It's no different than that. It's the same type of play. It's just controlling the pace of the game the way you want it to be.
He played within the rules. It's coaching. And speaking of coaching, let's give a tip our hats to defensive coordinator Aaron Henry. Now, we could talk about South Carolina having a new offensive coordinator. Illinois' defense was solid today. They kept the quarterback within the pockets. They made plays. They made big hits. They weren't, other than the big play, I don't know, what was 50, 60 yards on the field and the receiver almost dropped it. They didn't break today. And I've seen a lot of growth in what what he has done with his defense. And kudos to Coach to Coach Bielema for sticking with Aaron, because he's slowly making a name for himself. He made all the right calls today. Just very impressive today by Aaron Henry. And I don't think that can go unnoticed, and we shouldn't take that for granted, because there's 2 years ago, people were mad and upset because he was giving up all the points, and granted there was a turnover in roster. Now he has some players to play with, and he's making calls. You can tell this staff, we've seen all the fun stuff on social media, but this staff was prepared, like Brad just mentioned. They looked at the game film, and we see all the fun things, but they broke down and they took advantage of everything that South Carolina typically did that they took away from them.
Yeah, and I do think we're seeing, this is where I go back to, Brett Bielema is proving that what he did at Wisconsin, and maybe learning from some things that didn't work at Arkansas, and then pulling in some things from being in the orbit of Bill Belichick, he's all of a sudden, he's bringing all those things together. And I think that the Brett Bielema we have today is probably, believe it or not, a better coach than the Brett Bielema that we got 4 years ago. What else can you ask from a coach other than to bring your A game and keep working on it?
This is a guy who I do think you're right. I think he's a better coach than he was at Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin, he had so many amenities. He came in. I think one of the reasons he left Wisconsin was to show he could do it not at Wisconsin, because he was still Barry's program. And he struggled a little bit at Arkansas, but I think he was a little bit younger, a little bit brash, a little bit. But he's still brash. Don't get me wrong. We saw that, right? But I think he understands now how it works, and I think he's in the right place for him. He's a Big Ten coach. He likes to play a Big Ten style. This is exactly where he needs to be. He can recruit the Midwest. He knows how to put things together, and this guy's a really good developer of players. I think that's our missing thing that we don't understand. He has been great at. People talk about. They said he was left a lot of talent by Lovie Smith. He was. Lovie recruited a lot of under-the-radar guys who were talented. There's no question. But Brett developed them. They went from 1 stars and 0 stars into NFL players, and that's the large part due to Brett Bielema and his staff. So I give him credit. But he's got another opportunity next year. They're going to be, I think that they might be top 20 next year, top 15 preseason. I really think they could be. And to get talked about all that, and, you go in and then you win a few games in the conference schedule, you get to a good place, and man, it could take off. And then we're talking about maybe a down year the following year, but maybe not. But a down year, if a down year is 7 or 8 wins, and then every few years you've got a shot to compete at the top, that's all you can ask for.
But Mike, I see the comment here from Michael, the most fun bowl game in my lifetime as an Illini fan. I don't know how old you are, Michael, but I know how old Brad and Michael are. There's not been a lot of wins at our lifetime.
Got to go back to the Citrus Bowl 30 years ago, right?
No, just for the Citrus Bowl 30 years ago. But they've had some wins, but they've typically lost or not even got into bowl games. This one was fun because they came out and they didn't get blown out. They didn't embarrass themselves, and they played a high-quality opponent, an SEC school, and it was fun. That whole substitution thing just is taking ahead of itself. And I tell you what's going to happen. I would be very surprised if that rule doesn't get changed next year, or they're going to look at it. And I'm sure Shane is going to complain about it in his press conference, but they play within the rules and they didn't break the rules. And if it's there for you to use, it's like a timeout. If it's a timeout available and you don't take it, that you're lost, that you didn't do that. I get what you're saying, Michael, but for those older guys, and again, I don't know your age, this was great just because they didn't lose. And it's good seeing all the people now call Illinois a football school because they beat an SEC opponent.
Yeah, I got to go back to I was looking back, and if you're talking about for fun, the Citrus Bowl back in 89 or whatever, they won 31-21 over Virginia, or you got to go to the 1999 Micron PC Bowl, 63-21 Illinois. And I thought we were on to something there, and it just didn't quite happen. But I will tell you that this was fantastic. Somebody asked a question about what happened on that 60-yard pass. I almost wondered if the safeties got discombobulated on trying to spy on the quarterback, and maybe that caused it. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at film, and you'd also need to know who was doing what.
What were they supposed to be? Sometimes we think a guy got beat, but the reality is
somebody was
supposed to have help over the top, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that was just miscommunication. Is what it looked like to me over who was supposed to be in that spot. And I do think part of the court you saw those safeties staying deep and then coming up when the quarterback would start to run, perhaps, and come up. It's like a deep spy. You saw that one time when they had the sack. But so I think it's possible that they were deep, and then I think you're right. Maybe they started creeping up and they got caught in no man's land. But it looks like sometimes miscommunications happen. But if it only happens, and that was what they wanted to take away. They really only had two big chunk plays, I thought. Really, that play and the 36-yard touchdown run. Really, those were the two big plays. Everything else was, and that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to make them dink and dunk, make them complete passes underneath, make them get 7 yards max on a play, and make them have to convert on third down. And you saw them when they got in the red zone. Say what you want. The red zone defense today was fantastic. They brought pressure most of the time in the red zone because they felt like they could cover them over the top then. And then the one time that they rushed 3 on third, they'd come at them every time on third down in the red zone. And then that one play on third, they only rushed 3 on 3rd and 6 or whatever. And they only rushed 3 and dropped 8. They didn't get the first down. They go for it on 4th and 4, and then they bring the house and play man behind. So this was definitely a well-designed scheme. They had a plan. They executed it, and obviously it was effective because the reality is they won 28-17. Let's not forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, which we talked about with the officiating. But you know what? We're not going to make that a point of emphasis because this was nice to overcome some bad officiating from time to time, which was great. And to your point, now I was talking about next season. I wonder when the college playoffs are done and all the bowl games are done. I'm really curious to know where they're going to rank the Illini because I believe South Carolina was ranked 15th in the country. And Illinois was ranked 20th. I'm really curious to see if Illinois will finish up 13th in the country, right behind the college playoff teams, or 14th or 15th. So I'm really curious to see where they end up. And for those people who are asking, does it matter? Yes, it really does. I've said on our previous podcast, rankings matter because you can sell up with recruits. And when you turn on the TV, no matter what happens, you're going to see the Illinois logo up there. And coaches can sell that, hey, we're one of the better teams in college football this year. Now the selling point is going to be, can you sustain it? And they've done a good job. Even though they went to a bowl game and beat them his first year or second year, they were 5-7 last year. They didn't go 0-10, 0-12. So this is a process that we've seen. I think the transfer portal has helped us build this a little bit quicker than what we thought originally coming in. But it's just nice to see now that no matter what happens, when they take the field, they're going to have a chance to win. And I'm just really curious to see, like you mentioned, next year, you beat them, I think it's going to be a college playoff team. They're going to have the weapons to do it, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think they are. And we talked about donors, and Brad's already talked about the opportunity for that $6 million budget to potentially go up. And there's probably not anybody who's more closely understands what's going on in that world than Brad does. But Brad, any more just thoughts on NIL and how the donations are coming in and what people are attracted to?
I had said, I think I told people a while back on one of our podcasts, I don't know, that they had reached the $6 million goal for next year, and they were shooting higher now. I think now you're looking at a team that has a chance to go even higher. I think you're going to have some boosters, or some big donors who are going to throw in some extra money. A lot of times, the one thing about it, there are a couple donors, and Ked and I have talked about a couple guys, two boosters about these guys, and they who are silent a little bit. They don't maybe want people to know how much money they're actually giving, and who have thrown in some money, and it's been good. And yeah, so I definitely I think that the NIL funds are going to be there. I think they're going to do a good job being able to. And the other thing about this too, how does this? You went 7-1 at home too, right? 7-1 at home, I think it was this year. Now you're going to have next year an opportunity to go in and sell out how many of those games. You got an opportunity to season ticket sales are going to go through the roof compared to where they have been in the past few years. I think people now are a little bit like, this is what they needed. They needed to see something legitimate. And so this is huge.
And I also go ahead, Ked.
No, I'm sorry, just real quick. It gives them something to believe in. It's easy to sit and sell hope. Now they see a product on the field. They see something that they can invest in. And I guarantee it, we'll get the email, and I'm sure one of the five of us will tweet it out. But I guarantee it, Brad's right. Ticket sales are going to go up. People who haven't donated in the past, people don't understand every little bit counts. It all matters, because when you think it doesn't, your friend's doing it, and then their friend or their cousin and or uncle's doing it. It's going to make a difference. If you want to compete and have a chance to win, the NIL dollars are huge. It's not like it was 10 years ago where you have to get a kid, transfer, the kid has to sit out a year, and then hopefully he's eligible. This stuff really matters. And now that a lot of people are involved, and if you're in the media business, we are, you get some of the rumblings and what's going on behind the scenes. And Illinois is not where Ohio State is, and Penn State and Oregon. We've talked about that, but they're slowly climbing the ladder.
The other thing I was going to bring up, just a couple, again, I want to hit on some players whose play really stood out. But the Quad Cities, Matthew Bailey with 13 tackles, 5 solo. If there was a big play, it seemed like he was around it. Gabe Yakus, it was on the IlliniGuys Sports Spectacular, 8 tackles, 4 solo, 3 tackles for loss. And let's give Mr. Mead credit. He ended up with 8 tackles, had a great pass defense that could have changed the game had he not done that. I just look at what was going on out there, and there was just a lot of guys who were contributing. And it goes back to what we've talked about with Brett Bielema, being able to coach guys. And then you have him and Aaron Henry working on game plans. And boy, that really epitomizes why I have hope in this team, because Brett Bielema doesn't have to have the best players to win. South Carolina had some studs on that team, and Illinois outperformed those guys. And I think some of that comes to the Illinois players and what they bring. The other part comes to the coaching and how they're trained to play well in these high stress situations.
Yeah, I totally agree. South Carolina is very talented. Illinois put themselves in a position to win, and that's one thing Brett Bielema does a fantastic job of. Rarely do they get blown out. Oregon pretty much handled them, but everybody else this year, it's been a competitive game where they've had a chance to win even when they lost. But I have to say that you're exactly right. You're exactly right that they have a
that must be for Shane Beamer or a very upset South Carolina fan.
Oh, that's great. That's
cheating. Great. You know what, Brian? Help us understand cheating. In what
cheating
way?
Means he's using the rules in the rule book against us because I'm mad.
Yep. Yeah.
I just had to throw that in there. Sorry.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I know.
Hold on. Those script Illinois helmets. Oh my gosh, were they beautiful?
Yeah, bring them back. And by the way, how about the uniforms this year? Fantastic year of the Red Grange uniforms that whole weekend was fantastic. To do that in the same year, throw these uniforms, fantastic. So, no, this is, I totally agree with you about where they're at. And I think that the positive coaching, and Illinois did a great job with that. And I think they had a good game plan. They did all that stuff. But now you're looking at how about the sell you have? What's the sell? We're a legit program. We're a players program. Brett Bielema has your back. You see these guys, they have so much fun. And Illinois really hasn't lost game hasn't lost players, like key players. This faking injuries to slow momentum is not cheating. Oh, okay. So
it's not
arbiter,
cheating. Now we're using double negatives to confuse us.
Faking an injury. So here's my thing. Let me ask you, how did he know they were faking?
This guy is now the
he
arbiter
knows faking injuries because he's a fan.
He's a fan. So
the other team.
I watched on TV and I know they were faking. So it's a good.
Well, look, and you know what? And
you know what I love? You know what? The other thing I loved about this game, I have to say this. Beamer and Bielema taunted him. Beamer went nuts. But I'll tell you what, after the game, those two dudes manned up, shook hands, and just went the other way. That's what you do. You know what I mean? It was in the heat of battle. I love that they're competitive. But at the same time, those two guys they brought their teams ready to play. But at the end of the day, they were like, you know what? We shook hands and we moved on. And there wasn't any of this animosity where we had to posture at midfield or any of that stuff.
We didn't have any of this slapping. We're Howard up at Michigan. And we have fun with Brian, but he may not listen to Illini guys stuff. We don't call kids wimps or pussies or any of that stuff, whether they're Illini or whether they're opposing teams. So we just assume that they're doing their best, and we do that for both teams. So once you understand our shtick, because that's how we actually feel, we figure if you're going to go out in front of a crowd of people, you're going to try your best. Obviously, if you knew you were going to kick the field goal and knock the goalpost and not make it, you would have done something different, but I just assume we've all assumed that they're going to they're trying their best. But I do think it's an interesting thing, the way this team has gelled. And Brett Bielema, like I said, I wonder what will happen if he has a little bit more NIL dollars, because if I'm a player, Brad, like you said, I got a guy who's gonna cover my back. I got a guy who's proven he can get lesser talent into the NFL. And I've got a guy who proves that he can win at Illinois. And I thought the one thing that made this the best bowl matchup of the year was these two teams are two teams that are downtrodden, that are not in the elite of their conferences, and they both rose up this year and smacked down some people. And I thought this was two similar programs going to battle.
Red Grange wasn't just a football player, he was a legend. Discover the untold story of Illini great Red Grange in a new novel by Doug Vilhard called The Golden Age of Red. This captivating book takes you back to the 1920s when a humble young Illinois player transformed into the galloping ghost and electrified the nation. Get your copy of The Golden Age of Red by Doug Vilhard today. Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, credit to both programs. I will say this. I think that both teams are set up to be good for years to come. I really do. I think that both these teams are in that situation. So I think that you got to give credit to Beamer, what he's done there, because that is not, South Carolina, again, is not one of those, I guess I would say they're not one of those teams that like the Blue Bloods. They're not Alabama. They're not Georgia. They're not, but man, they were a really good team. LSU, the teams that have all the NIL dollars they throw around. So give Beamer credit. But at the same time, I think that today just showed that Illinois can compete with the best teams in the SEC. Maybe not Georgia, I don't know, but this year, or Texas, I don't know. But they can definitely compete with the rest of them.
And that's what you want. You want to go out there and compete. Sorry about that, Mike. You want to go compete, give yourself a chance. And what was the spread? I think it was 9 or 10. That's the other thing we haven't talked about, the lack of respect that they gave Illinois. And I get it, I understand. But not only did they win, but they covered the spread. And so if you really think about it, we talked about this, and we said I wasn't going to harp on the officiating. This game was a blowout. If the officials would have done their jobs, it wouldn't have been a close game.
Yeah. And look, even on the Illini guys, Larry and I made our play to tie up Brad and Matt for a 4-way tie on predictions this year because Larry and I went with the Illini. But I have to be honest with you, I definitely was concerned because I have a lot of respect for this team, and I really felt that was a team that was really tough, and I thought that they were a team that was worthy of respect. And I'll be honest with you, I think Illinois would have beat the snot out of Alabama had they played Alabama today. I think South Carolina is a better team than Alabama, and I think Illinois played a really good game and was fortunate. They came away with a win, and it could have been a little bit bigger. But I have nothing but positives to say about this South Carolina team that Illinois beat.
Well, Mike, tell you this. I don't know if you've seen this. I just saw on Twitter. Josh McCray just publicly said during a press conference he did not fumble the football. He was 100% sure he didn't fumble it. And we talked about this earlier. Very disappointing that they didn't go back to check that play out or overlook it.
Yeah, and it certainly looked that way from the video. And Philip talks about Illinois is better than Indiana. I don't know that anything proves it because they didn't play each other. And to be honest, now I'm going to even go out where I'm saying that South Carolina is better than Alabama, but when they played each other, Alabama beat South Carolina. It's a little bit crazy, but I do think that Illinois versus Indiana, we unfortunately were cheated out of seeing a great game by the schedule makers. I would have loved to have seen that. And I believe, I don't have it right in front of me, but I believe Illinois will be playing Indiana. I think they're going to play them next year.
Yes, they are. I saw 100% sure they are.
Yep. And that is going to be fun because, look, Brett Bielema is a damn good football coach. Kurt Cignetti is a good football coach. We'll see if he can do this a couple years in a row. But Cignetti's a heck of a coach. So I have nothing but hope for watching that team. And I don't know if they'll win 6 games next season. And the point is, I know people don't like Indiana, and I don't like Indiana, although Iowa is my worst Big Ten team because of Bruce Pearl. But the bottom line is Indiana's got Mark Cuban throwing in money, and they've got Eli Lilly people throwing in money. So I think that football team is going to have a few years where they may be able to attract folks, and Cignetti's a good enough coach that he may be able to build something up. And I think Bielema may be in the same position. I just think that Bielema is proving what he can do because, again, and I've been an Illinois fan. I grew up in Mahomet. I've been going to games since the 0-0 tie, 1977, 9, whatever it was. I've been going there that long to watch games. And ultimately, the Illinois is a very hard place to win. And Brett Bielema is proving exactly that he can do that. And I'm going to give him nothing but props because how many guys have been there and tried and failed? Any thoughts, Ked?
Mike, I'll tell you this. Let's look back. I'm going to talk about myself. I'm not going to include you with this. There were times earlier last year, I was critical earlier in the year, comments about what to do on offense, what to do, this and that. He has a system, and there's a reason that he is being paid as much as he is. There's a reason that Josh Whitman didn't hire me or you or Brad or Larry or Matt. Yep. He knows what he's doing. Is it pretty? No. And the thing is with him, he just wants to win games. And the thing I really like about Brett and what's special about this is that he is an Illinois guy. He wants to be in Illinois. I don't think he wants to leave Illinois. He's passionate about it. Here's a guy that when he does a TV interview, radio interview, he always ends it with ILL. That's a homegrown guy, and you can sell that within the state. One thing Matt Stevens and I talk a lot about is him getting the top 1 or 2 players in the state. It's going to take a while. It's not going to happen overnight. They're going to get some. I think, no disrespect to Beatty and all those guys, but I think when he got Caden Fagan, that was a game changer for me. And even Malik Elzy. Malik had to play behind some really high-quality receivers this year. Next year, it's going to be his show. He's going to have to show people how good he is, and it's going to be his opportunity to go out there and perform. And if you look at every state, all your best players don't stay home. They just don't. You're going to lose some. Would it be nice to get more great? Yes. But at the end of the day, I tell people this all the time. They're right now, it was 9-3, but today they're 10-3, and they didn't have the best players from the state of Illinois. All of them stay home. Would it be great? Yes. But some of those players you have to convince this is a good place to play. Illinois, if you come and stay home, you're going to have a chance to play. Brett can sell that because he is an Illinois guy.
Yeah, I agree totally. And I do think that he basically understands the state of Illinois. And I have to just wonder how good Illinois could be if he could start cracking into some of that Chicago stuff where we've got guys who've sent people to Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan for decades.
Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. I don't think you're ever going to solve that problem. But I think there's going to be, do you want to go to Iowa? And do you want to go to Iowa and play that horrific offense, because it ain't going to change till Kirk Ferentz. It wasn't his son, it was Kirk. So it's not going to change. And I got to think, to my way of speaking, at some point, Bielema's going to start attracting these guys and these players and these coaches from Illinois, and particularly Chicagoland. And I'm, again, you don't need all Illinois players. That's not my point. But my point is, you could get where you get a few guys and you start really developing that. Just what Nathaniel Marshall, I think was his name, the stud who's going, I believe, to Michigan. Yeah, you get a few guys like that, one or two like that every year. That really beefs up your team.
It makes a huge difference. I guess I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on it because that shows our age, but back in the day, that was the thing you had to do. It would be great. And I'm not saying, because people know how passionate I am about the state of Illinois, especially high school athletics. But a lot of these guys, they leave and then they end up wanting to come back. But you bust your behind, you work hard, you sell your product. At the end of the day, if the kid felt he wanted to go somewhere else, so be it. Here's a good example. Illinois lost a kid to Notre Dame a couple years ago who lived literally probably 5 blocks from my house. But then reason and legally, I did all the things I could to help land this kid, and he wanted to go to Notre Dame. And his brother graduated from University of Illinois. So sometimes it just doesn't work out, and it doesn't mean that Illinois failed. It's easy to sit and say, the kid didn't go to Illinois, so you got to get a better coach, you got to get a better approach. Sometimes it doesn't matter. I'll use one example, and this is apples and oranges. Illinois lost a women's basketball recruit, Divine Burge, to LSU, and I've just learned over the last few weeks that was her dream school since she was 5-6 years old. Why? I didn't know that. So having said that, sometimes and she loved Illinois and still loves them. Sometimes it's just, you can't overcome some of these barriers. And if things don't work out, that's why burn bridges. These kids come back around.
Yeah. Brad, any thoughts on the Illinois connections and building those?
Well, I mean, I think you've seen Brett Bielema really get out and to have his staff get out and meet with the high school coaches and get to know these guys. And most of the high school coaches you'll talk to, they do like him now, but it takes time. You have to have some success to show them. I think, they've been able to get some guys. I think in the 26 class, you're going to see them have a better in-state haul than they've had, because now you're recruiting on this win on this season. Overall, I think the other thing is, though, and I want them to get Illinois guys. I think it's great. At the end of the day, what you do is you recruit your high school guys. The ones that stick around and pan out, they're going to play, whatever. The ones that aren't, you're going to go replace in the portal anyway. So at the end of the day, the portal is probably the most important part of this whole process. You still have to recruit at high school level, but for a school like Illinois, you're going to have to go out and get those guys. Now, somebody mentioned in one of the comments I thought was really good. I was talking about this revenue sharing and how if Illinois does have this $22 million, you're going to have a better thing. Now, that doesn't mean Ohio State's going to suddenly say it's even spending, but it does give you a pretty good baseline, because eventually you say, all right, so I can get $1 million from this school. They're going to give me 1.5. But if I really want to be at this school, the $1 million will be enough. You know what I mean? Like, you can compete at least. And yeah, it's pretty impressive. Yeah, it does tie for the most wins, 10 wins in a season. It ties the most for Illinois history, set 6 times. Last time was 2001. And they've had 2 seasons where they won their 10th game in the bowl game, and both times it was in the
Citrus Bowl.
Citrus Bowl. Yeah,
that's right.
Yep. And for the other thing that I want to tell people is there are some years as Illini fans you get totally invested in, and I'll give the 1983 season is probably the most I've ever, because I was at every home game that year. And you get so invested, and then to be at home and you're watching the Rose Bowl, and literally by the 5th play, you're like, uh-oh, I think we're out of this. So I think ultimately this was so great to see the Illini fight through all the challenges that they were fighting through. I thought that was fantastic. And I do think we are finally at a point where Illinois is in the hands of a very good coach who has what he needs. Now, the other thing I want to say is Barry Lunny gets a lot of crap from fans. He gets a lot of people, oh, I wouldn't have run that ball, or, oh, we got to do more, or, oh, and even me, I'm like, can we get under the center when it's 4th and 1? But Barry Lunny actually takes a lot of crap. Ked, you saw that second half in that 4th quarter when Barry Lunny controlled that game. Do people Do they understand how important he's been to Illinois' success?
I'm going to tell you this. I was sitting with people watching this game because obviously I couldn't go. I told people if South Carolina didn't score, this game was over because he is a master at running clock, not giving the ball back. You talk about strides, and I'm going to tell you, in the offseason, there's going to be a lot of people knocking down his door. I don't say that he and Coach Bielema disagree, but his offense is hard. It's really hard to predict what you're going to get with the University of Illinois. I saw looks and schemes today I had not seen all season. He is a really good coordinator. I know he's going to be sought after from coaches, and I know Illinois is going to have to fork over a couple extra dollars, a cup of coffee to keep him because, Mike, he did a really good job. I have no complaints today at all with what they did, for the full 60 minutes.
Any thoughts on Barry Lunny, Brad, and his importance to the team?
I think he's good. He and Luke obviously work well together, and I think that is what you want to see a guy. You want to have consistency from the coordinator position. I think that's really important. And Barry Lunny's a good offensive coordinator. Some people don't like this, don't like that, or whatever, think he needs to do this. No, I think Barry Lunny's a good offensive coordinator, very good. I think he deserves what he gets. He's obviously a hot commodity. I think Aaron Henry, we've seen growth from him as a coach. I think these guys. At the end of the day, though, what people have to understand is Barry Lunny might be a different offensive coordinator for a different head coach. Brett Bielema, he does what Brett Bielema wants him to do. Aaron Henry does what Brett Bielema wants him to do. Don't get confused that somehow these guys come up with all their own schemes and Bielema doesn't have any input in it. Bielema has input in everything that happens here. So this is going to be so it's very interesting. I think people sometimes forget that this is Brett Bielema's team, but Barry Lunny, I think, does a good job. That play call, the bootleg with Altmaier late, was a huge play to run some clock, get some yards there, stayed in bounds, and I thought the coaching staff did a fantastic job, and Barry Lunny Jr. included.
Yeah, I think he gets a lot of grief, and so it's pretty amazing to see how things have gone under him. And again, I really like what Lunny has done. So we'll have to see as we go. I think 2000, as Brad went through, I think 2001 they were 10-2, 1989 they were 10-2, 1983 they were 10-2, 1902, which is Brad's personal favorite year, they were 10-2-1, and 2024 10-3. So I think Ohio State has more 12 or 13 win seasons than Illinois has 10. And maybe next year we'll have the opportunity to see the Illini go after an 11-win season because I think they can win 10 games next year in the regular season. And I'm not saying that they'll be a CFP team, but they'll be a team that has to be looked at in that group to see if they're good enough to go. Any final thoughts on this game, Brad? Anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to throw out there?
Yeah, I think the one thing I'll say is I think the coaching staff did a great job putting their players in position to succeed in this one. I thought the offensive line was good. I thought the defensive front held up. And I would agree with Brad P. Evidently, he's a smart guy, too. All of us are. And guys named Brad are smart. So, I think it was their best game of the year. But I thought they put their guys in a position to succeed. I think they understood that they had some deficiencies trying to cover wide receivers and maybe at the down the field. And so they didn't allow that to beat them. They didn't allow that to be a situation where they were going to do that. They made them throw it underneath. And I think they did a good job of containing the South Carolina quarterback, who is a fantastic athlete. So, yeah, very impressive. I think game plan is perfect. And then the other thing I will say is that Luke Altmaier is just a perfect quarterback for this offense that they want to run with his passing skills and they want to run the football and play action and all those things that he wants to do. So, yeah. So a great win, great season, and kudos to Illinois football.
I want to end with this part. There was a comment that I just saw on Twitter from one of our colleagues that Luke Altmaier made a comment that he's tired of Illinois being disrespected. Illinois is a good program. That shows you the growth in the relationship that he has with the staff and what he thinks about the University of Illinois from a guy from Starkville, Mississippi, who is now wanting to put Illinois on the map, and he's partly responsible for it. The other part is, I'll end with this. Think about when we started these podcasts, Mike, way back in August. We were doing our predictions. How many wins would Illinois get? 6, 7, 8. They got 10. The people listening to our podcast, who were you? Which one were you? Where were you on the fence? I think I said 8. I'm still going to stick with that.
And you were the highest, I think, of us.
I think I was 7.
Yeah, and I had us at 6. And I'll be honest with you, when I did 6, I struggled to
find 6.
Find 6, and so it certainly proved how good this team was. And again, I go back to coaching, because you really have to have talented players, but you've got to put them, as Brad talked about, in positions to succeed. And man, they have done that, especially on a defensive line that we thought was thin, and they've done a great job of that.
So what does this say about the program, though? When think about how many guys the last 2 years are in the NFL, from Devin Witherspoon to Johnny Newton to Sidney Brown to Chase Brown, and playing and doing well too, continue on down the line, and yet they're still winning 10 games, even though they're putting all so they're replenishing the talent. That's what great programs do. Yes, it's not a big deal when Alabama does it, right? They do it every year. Georgia, whatever, they have NFL talent all the time, but Illinois got NFL talent, and they're replenishing it and still winning. So this is good.
Yep, totally agree. Yeah, I don't know that Brett's going to bring in Pat Fitzgerald as an analyst. But let's let a few lawsuits settle first. And we'll see.
No kidding.
I don't know if we're going to see that happen yet.
Yeah, and I do think the development part that you bring up, Brad, because
and perhaps he could bring in Deshaun Watson as his quarterback coach too.
And I'll be honest, I would say that the development, and it's a little chicken and egg, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, because I hear all these people saying Brett Bielema inherited Devin Witherspoon and all these different players. They weren't playing like all Americans when Brett Bielema got here. And so
there's a reason Lovie Smith got fired, right?
Yes. And so to me, it's like, when you try to play the card that they had all this talent, he could have easily pulled a Deion Sanders and said, you guys suck, out the door. And he didn't. And he had an eye to figure out, let's think about this. I'm going to have you guys guess a safety who's playing for the Detroit Lions. Did we know he was a defensive back before Brett Bielema and company got here? Because never played. And all of a sudden you go from a guy who's never played to one of the best in the country.
Yep. It's huge.
Yeah. And so I think that is big.
Coaching matters.
Yes, it does. So folks, we are going to tap out on this one, because at 1 hour and 6 minutes, I know that there's some fans who are having fatigue, but when Matt Stevens gets done interviewing coaches and players, I will be back on. So search for your Illini guys, or search for @Mike Cagley on Twitter, so that you can jump on and listen to us live. This, and then the Matt will also be released later on as a podcast and as a YouTube, so you can peruse it later on. But we're not going to apologize. We are excited. We think this program has, under Brett Bielema, has given us multiple reasons to be optimistic for the future. And I'm going to tell you, I haven't been optimistic about the Illini like this since John Makovic walked out the door, because when Turner was here, he certainly had great years, but he also could throw the 0 wins up. So I was never really sold. And when Ron Zook was here, I had no doubt that he could recruit better than any Illinois coach ever. I just wasn't certain if he could coach them. And so with Brett Bielema, I really think we're back to the era of John Makovic, who a coach who can coach and has a plan and sticks to the plan. So with that, folks, we are going to say goodbye, but we'll be on a little later with Matt. And the final thing, which is important, it doesn't slow down, folks. Thursday night, Illinois plays Oregon in an awesome top 20 matchup in basketball. So don't take a breath right now. If you're going to subscribe to Illini Guys, do it. Get on there so you can get the message boards. You can hear everything that Brad and Ked are hearing behind the scenes, the whispers, the rumors, the innuendo, so that you hear it first. Until we're on with Matt, go Illini.